I used to think my life was unshakable. Not perfect, no, perfection had long since slipped through my fingers, but stable. I had 2 kids who were my entire world, a modest but warm home, and a wife I thought I understood. And then one Friday evening, that stability was ripped away in the time it takes to boil a kettle. She didn't slam the door when she left. That's what I remember most. No screaming, no breaking dishes, no dramatic suitcase dragging down the hallway. Just a quiet click, the kind of sound you hear when a hotel door locks behind you. My boys were upstairs, finishing their homework, when she came into the kitchen with her phone in her hand and a calmness in her voice that felt almost cruel. "Daniel," she said, not meeting my eyes, "I'm moving out. I've met someone else." At first I thought she was joking. The kind of joke that's not funny, but still something you can shake off. But she kept talking, her sentences clipped, rehearsed. His name was Paul. He was older. Wealthier. No, she hadn't been happy for years. Yes, she'd been seeing him for months. And no, she didn't think the kids would understand right now, so she was going to tell them later. I didn't speak. Couldn't. The kettle clicked off in the background and the room smelled faintly of burnt toast. My hands were cold. My mind did that strange thing where it focuses on tiny, irrelevant details, the chipped edge of the counter, the way her scarf was still damp from the rain, instead of the hurricane ripping through the center of your life. When she walked out, she left behind a coffee cup in the sink and half a bottle of wine on the counter. Her perfume lingered for hours, taunting me. By bedtime, the boys asked where Mom had gone, and I mumbled something about her visiting a friend. I couldn't break their hearts the same night mine shattered. The days after were a blur of logistics and numbness. I still got up at 6:30, made breakfast, packed lunches, did the school run. But at night, after they were asleep, I'd sit in the kitchen with the lights off, staring into the dark, replaying that conversation until it frayed at the edges. I felt like the walls of the house had been pushed out, everything was emptier, colder, and I couldn't find the edges anymore. Then the rumors started. She wasn't shy about her new life. Pictures of weekend getaways, dinners at places we couldn't have afforded in a year, her hand resting lightly on the shoulder of a man in a tailored suit. Friends stopped making eye contact in the grocery store. Some avoided me altogether, as if betrayal might be contagious. I didn't hate her. Not yet. I think I was too stunned to feel much beyond exhaustion. But a seed had been planted, not of revenge, but of something quieter, heavier. The realization that I was now both mother and father, and there was no one left to lean on. That weight settled into my chest and didn't move. And somewhere, deep in the noise of my thoughts, a quiet question began to echo: if she could leave so easily, who, if anyone, would ever stay? The first week without her, I discovered how loud silence can be. It wasn't the absence of conversation, we'd spoken in clipped sentences for months before she left. It was the absence of the small sounds that had once filled the house without me noticing, her heels clicking down the hallway in the morning, the hairdryer in the bathroom, the rattle of her keys when she came in late. Now, after the kids went to bed, the only sound was the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of the walls. I kept busy. The boys needed me too. Mornings became a sprint, get them dressed, fed, and out the door before the clock threatened to make them late. Evenings were homework battles, dinner improvisations, and laundry loads that seemed to multiply when I wasn't looking. I found out I could braid hair from watching a YouTube video, and that Eli liked his grilled cheese cut diagonally while Sam preferred squares. Those little preferences became anchor points in a sea of things I couldn't control. But the quiet moments between chores, those were dangerous. That's when the doubt and anger crept in. I'd be scrubbing dishes and suddenly picture her laughing across some candlelit table, her wine glass catching the light, his hand over hers. It was like watching a life I'd been edited out of. Some nights I'd go into the boys' room just to hear them breathing, to remind myself there was still something here worth holding on to. money became another silent predator. Her income had covered more than I'd realized. I cut cable, downgraded my phone plan, started bringing lunch to work. I sold the car we'd bought 2 years ago and picked up a dented sedan from a classified ad. It rattled on cold mornings, but it got the kids where they needed to go. I took a second shift twice a week at the warehouse, arranging for my sister to stay with the boys those nights. It wasn't enough to build anything, but it kept us from sinking. Sundays, I did the laundry at the old laundromat on Maple Street. Ours had broken again and I couldn't afford the repair. The place smelled faintly of detergent and old coffee. There was a cracked tile near the back wall, and I always seemed to step on it. The boys would bring coloring books and turn the laundry carts into race cars while I fed quarters into machines that shook like they were trying to break free. It was on one of those Sundays, an unremarkable February afternoon, snow melting into gray puddles outside, that I noticed her for the first time. She was sitting 2 chairs down, reading a paperback, her dark hair pulled up with what looked like a pencil. There was a calmness about her, a sort of self-contained quiet that didn't feel lonely. She smiled once at something she read, and I found myself watching just to see if she'd do it again. We didn't speak that day. She gathered her laundry, tucked the book under her arm, and left without looking back. But as I folded the boys' shirts, I realized something. It was the first time in weeks I'd noticed another person in a way that wasn't about survival or suspicion. Just noticed. I didn't know it yet, but that cracked tile laundromat was going to change everything. The following Sunday, the laundromat was busier than usual. Someone's clothes were piled on top of a machine that had stopped mid-cycle, a toddler was crying in the corner, and the vending machine had an out-of-order sign taped to it in black marker. The air was warm and damp, smelling of detergent and wet cotton. The boys were in the middle of a laundry cart race, and I was trying to stop Sam from ramming into a dryer when I noticed her again. Same seat, same book, though this time it was face down on her lap while she sorted a pile of shirts. She wore a pale blue sweater that made her skin look warmer, her hair loose around her shoulders instead of pinned up. She looked up briefly and gave me a small nod. I nodded back, awkward, like we were part of a quiet club that met once a week without ever talking. It might have stayed that way, 2 strangers orbiting in silence, if not for the grape juice. Eli had brought his water bottle, but Sam insisted on a juice box he'd tucked into his jacket pocket. I didn't notice until the straw came loose and a dark purple arc splashed across the floor, soaking one of my laundry baskets. I cursed under my breath, reaching for the paper towel roll by the sink. Before I could, she was there, quick, efficient, kneeling with a handful of napkins from her own bag. "Purple comet," she said, blotting the mess, her tone so calm it startled me. Sam stared at her like she'd just named a planet after him. Eli grinned, the kind of grin that means he's filing something away to tell later. "Sorry about that," I said, uselessly waving my handful of towels. "They're still in the learning phase." "Aren't we all?" she replied, dabbing at the last of the spill before tossing the soaked napkins into the trash. "At least it's juice. Paint water's worse." I smiled despite myself. "I'll take your word for it." "I'm Maya," she said then, as if the juice spill was the appropriate moment for introductions. "Daniel," I answered. "These 2 troublemakers are Eli and Sam." She gave each of them a small wave, and Sam, usually shy, waved back without hesitation. The rest of the hour passed with small exchanges, a comment about how the dryers always eat socks, a joke about the broken vending machine, her offering the boys a couple of peppermint candies from her bag. It was nothing dramatic, but it felt easy. No awkward pauses, no sense of having to impress. Just 2 people killing time in a laundromat. When it was time to leave, she gathered her neatly folded laundry into a canvas tote and slung it over her shoulder. "See you next Sunday, Daniel," she said, like it was already decided. Driving home, the boys chattered about how the Juice Comet lady was nice and how her candy was better than mine. I didn't say much, but I caught myself smiling at stoplights. It had been a long time since a conversation left me feeling lighter instead of drained. That night, after they went to bed, I caught myself wondering what book she'd been reading, and whether she'd be there again next week. The thought was quiet, almost shy, but it stayed with me. The snow had mostly melted by the next Sunday, leaving the sidewalks wet and glistening. When I walked into the laundromat, the boys made a beeline for the rolling carts as usual. Maya was already there, leaning against one of the folding tables, her book open but her eyes on the window. "Morning," I said, setting our basket down. "Morning," she replied, and her smile reached all the way to her eyes. I was actually going to ask, "Do you and the kids ever go to the Saturday market downtown?" I shook my head. Saturdays were usually for cleaning the apartment and trying to catch up on the week's mess. "You should," she said. "Free samples, weird pottery, sometimes a guy who juggles knives." She glanced at the boys. "Though maybe skip the knife part." The following weekend, against my usual instinct to avoid crowds, we went. The air was warmer, the sky that pale spring blue that feels like a promise. Stalls lined the street, selling everything from fresh bread to hand-painted mugs. The boys darted between tables, sampling bits of cheese and homemade jam, their pockets quickly stuffed with pamphlets and free stickers. Maya met us by the kettle corn stand, wearing a light green scarf that fluttered in the breeze. She crouched down to Sam's height and asked if freckles were sky sprinkles. Sam giggled and nodded like it was obvious. Eli immediately dragged her toward a table selling tiny wooden cars. She seemed to know everyone, the bread seller, the woman knitting scarves, the man sharpening knives. Yes, he was there. She bought a loaf of rosemary bread, tucking it into her tote alongside a sketchpad I hadn't noticed before. At a coffee truck, we sat at a wobbly table sipping hot drinks. My phone buzzed, a text from my ex asking if she could take the boys to some resort the following weekend. My weekend. I stared at the message, my jaw tightening, then typed back, "We'll stick to the schedule." Her reply came quick, a picture of a rooftop pool. Maya noticed my face but didn't push. She slid a napkin toward me. "The cinnamon rolls here are messy." That's the point. The boys were busy splitting the largest roll I'd ever seen, sugar sticking to their fingers. I let the warmth of the coffee and the low hum of the market settle into me. For the first time in months, I wasn't counting minutes or calculating costs in my head. Before we left, Maya mentioned a kids' art class she taught at the community center on Wednesdays. "It's free," she said, "and we do our best to keep the paint off clothes." Mostly. Driving home, Eli said, "She listens when we talk." Sam, still licking cinnamon from his fingers, simply said, "She's nice." That night, when the boys were in bed, I found the napkin still in my jacket pocket, crumpled but somehow worth keeping. Wednesday after school, the boys bounced through the doors of the community center like they'd been waiting their whole lives to get there. The place smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and something earthy, paint, maybe, or clay. Bright paper cutouts hung from strings along the walls, swaying slightly as kids ran past. Maya was in the middle of the room, wearing a denim apron streaked with dried colors. Her hair was pulled back, but a few strands had escaped and curled against her cheek. She waved us over. "Eli, Sam. You made it." Tables were covered in newspaper, each place set with brushes, small jars of water, and palettes dotted with paint in every color imaginable. The boys slid into seats without hesitation. I stayed off to the side, leaning against the doorway, telling myself I was just there to supervise. Maya had a way of moving through the room without making a fuss, bending to show one child how to mix a softer green, praising another's bold strokes, gently redirecting someone trying to paint the table instead of the paper. She noticed small things, the way Sam gripped his brush too tightly, the little frown Eli made when his colors bled together. She knelt beside them, gave tips, and left space for them to figure it out themselves. Halfway through, she caught me watching. You can join in, you know, she said with a grin. It's not an exclusive club. I'd probably just embarrass them, I said. They'd survive, she replied, then moved on to help a girl painting a giant sunflower. By the end of the class, Eli had a messy but proud portrait of a soccer ball mid-kick, and Sam had created what he claimed was a dragon, but friendly. Maya wrapped their work in brown paper to protect it. Hang them somewhere important, she told me. We walked out into the cool evening air. The boys were buzzing with stories about who spilled water and who painted a horse that looked like a cow. They clutched their brown paper packages like treasure. On the way home, Eli asked if we could go back next week. Sam interrupted, "No, can we go back tomorrow?" I laughed, but something in me warmed at how quickly they'd claimed this new space as their own. That night, after they were asleep, I hung the paintings on the wall above the kitchen table. The dragon's smile was crooked, the soccer ball looked like a lumpy planet. But they made the room feel less like a stopgap and more like a home. I thought about Maya, the way she'd crouched down to listen to the kids, her patience so natural it didn't seem like an effort. I'd met people who treated kindness like a performance, something they put on when others were watching. Maya's felt different. Steady. Unforced. For the first time since my wife left, I realized I wasn't just surviving the week. I was looking forward to something. It was just past midnight when I woke to the sound of coughing. Not the mild, half-asleep kind, but deep and sharp. I stumbled into the boys' room to find Sam flushed and sweaty, his breaths short and fast. I tried to stay calm, but the numbers on the thermometer climbed past anything I was comfortable with. A cold washcloth didn't help. Neither did pacing the floor with him in my arms. By 1 a.m., I'd decided, we were going to the ER. I buckled Sam into the back seat, Eli still in his pajamas beside him, wide-eyed and silent. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out at a red light, a text from Maya. "Everything okay? Just saw your light on." I hesitated for a second, then typed back, "Heading to the hospital. Sam's running a high fever." Her reply came almost instantly, "I'm coming. What do you need?" "Nothing. We'll be fine," I wrote, but she didn't answer. 20 minutes later, we were in a curtained ER bay, the nurse checking Sam's oxygen levels, when Maya appeared. She was wearing jeans, a hoodie, and no makeup, her hair loose and slightly tangled like she'd run out the door without thinking. She carried a grocery bag with juice boxes, crackers, and a small stuffed bear. "I told you we'd be fine," I said quietly, but I couldn't stop the wave of relief that washed over me. "Juice box for Eli," she said, handing it over. "Crackers for you. Bear for Sam." While the nurse started an 4 for fluids, Maya stood on the other side of the bed, distracting Sam with a game where they named animals starting with each letter of the alphabet. She didn't flinch when he gripped her hand. It turned out to be strep throat with dehydration, bad enough to scare me, but not serious enough to keep us overnight. By 4 a.m., we were back in the car. Maya followed me home in hers, just to be sure we made it. When I carried Sam inside, Eli trailed behind, holding the bear. Maya lingered in the doorway, her eyes soft but unreadable. "Text me later," she said. "Even if it's just to say you've both slept." I wanted to thank her, but the words felt too small. After she left, I settled the boys into their beds. The apartment was quiet again, but it wasn't the same empty quiet as before. There was still the echo of her voice in the hall, the memory of her hand steadying Sam, the grocery bag on my counter with 2 unopened juice boxes waiting. I realized then that she hadn't just shown up for the kids. She'd shown up for me. The day after the ER felt like the morning after a storm, the air still heavy, but calmer. Sam's fever had broken sometime before dawn, and he was curled on the couch watching cartoons with the bear Maya brought him. Eli was in charge of fetching water refills, a job he took surprisingly seriously. I'd barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw flashes of last night, Sam's pale face under the fluorescent hospital lights, Maya's steady hand on his, the way she asked the nurse careful questions like she'd been there 100 times before. Around noon, my phone buzzed. "Maya, I made soup. Don't argue. I'm on my way." 15 minutes later, she was in my kitchen ladling chicken soup into mismatched bowls. She'd brought a loaf of crusty bread, too, wrapped in brown paper. "Eat," she said, sliding a bowl toward me. I sat across from her while the boys ate in the living room. The steam rose between us, carrying the scent of rosemary and garlic. I wanted to tell her how much last night meant, how I'd never had someone outside of family just show up like that. Instead, I said, "The soup's good." She smiled faintly. "Better than grape juice on the floor?" "Much better," I said, and she laughed, that same quick, warm laugh from the laundromat. The rest of the day was quiet. She stayed until evening, helping Eli with a tricky math problem, showing Sam how to fold paper cranes. When she finally gathered her things to leave, Sam wrapped his arms around her waist without hesitation. Eli just said, "See you Wednesday," like it was a given. After the door closed, the apartment felt different. Not empty, filled with something new. It wasn't love, not yet. But it was the awareness that life had more color than it did a few months ago, and that Maya was part of the reason. Over the next weeks, she became woven into our schedule without anyone deciding it. She still taught her Wednesday art classes, but sometimes she joined us at the market on Saturdays. She sat with us at the laundromat, sharing candies or telling the boys stories about the odd characters who came through her community center. And I found myself noticing small things. The way she tilted her head when she listened. How she always carried a sketchpad, even if she didn't take it out. The faint scent of lemon on her clothes, like she'd been somewhere warm. I didn't know where it was going. I wasn't sure I was ready for anything to go anywhere. But I knew this, she'd been in our lives for just a few months, and already the idea of not seeing her felt wrong. One night, as I was tucking the boys in, Eli asked, "Do you think Maya would come to my soccer game next weekend?" "Maybe," I said. He grinned. "She'd probably bring snacks." After they were asleep, I sat in the dark living room and thought about that. She probably would. And the thought didn't scare me. Saturday morning, the field was already buzzing by the time we arrived. Eli's soccer team was warming up, kids in mismatched cleats kicking balls across the grass, parents clutching coffee cups like lifelines. Sam clung to my side, his small hand in mine, while I scanned the sidelines for an empty spot. That's when I saw her, Maya, standing near the goalpost with a thermos in one hand and a tote bag slung over her shoulder. She was wearing a baseball cap pulled low, but I'd have known her anywhere. "You came," I said as we walked up. "I promised snacks," she replied, patting the tote. "And I never break snack promises." Sam immediately claimed a seat beside her on the folding chair she'd brought. I set up our blanket nearby, trying not to notice how natural she looked there, waving to Eli when he glanced our way. The game was chaos, kids chasing the ball in a clump, parents shouting encouragement or instructions that no one listened to. Maya didn't yell. She clapped when Eli made a pass, laughed when a kid tripped over his own shoelace and popped back up. At halftime, she pulled out sliced oranges and granola bars like she'd been doing this for years. When Eli scored in the second half, he turned first toward the goal, then toward us. Toward her. She stood and clapped, grinning so wide I could see it from across the field. After the game, the boys swarmed around her, chattering about who almost scored and who had the fastest socks. She listened like every detail mattered. I carried the gear back to the car, and when I turned, she was crouched to tie Sam's untied shoelace, the brim of her cap shading both their faces. We ended up at the diner down the street, the one with sticky red booths and milkshakes served in tall metal cups. The boys demolished pancakes while Maya and I shared a plate of fries. She asked about my week, and I found myself telling her more than I'd planned, about a shipment gone wrong at work, about my sister's new job, even about the court date looming next month to finalize custody details. "You'll handle it," she said simply, like it was fact. "You've already handled worse." Driving home, the boys dozed in the back seat, their hair still damp from quick showers in the locker room. Maya sat beside me, quiet, looking out the window at the late afternoon sun turning everything gold. At my building, she helped carry the gear upstairs. Before she left, she reached into her tote and handed me a folded piece of paper. "For Eli," she said, then hesitated. "For you, too, I guess." After she was gone, I unfolded it. It was a quick sketch, Eli mid-kick, hair flying, one arm out for balance. She'd caught the exact moment his face lit up after the goal. In the corner, a tiny figure on the sideline clapped, her baseball cap tilted back. I pinned it to the fridge. That night, after the boys were asleep, I stood in the kitchen staring at it. It hit me then, this wasn't just her stepping into our lives. Somehow, we'd stepped into hers. The following week after the soccer game, life tried to slip back into its usual rhythm: school runs, late-night laundry, quick dinners that somehow stretched into homework battles. But somewhere in the middle of it all, there was this steady undercurrent. Maya was in it. Not in the way my ex used to loom over my days like a shadow, but in the way sunlight quietly spills into a room without asking permission. Wednesday's art class came around, and the boys didn't just want to go, they treated it like a mission. Sam packed his own water bottle, miracle, and Eli reminded me twice not to forget the paintings they'd started last week. When we arrived, Maya was already there, crouched over a box of fresh supplies. She looked up, saw us, and her face lit in that way that makes you feel like you've just done something worth noticing. Halfway through the class, I ended up at one of the tables, brush in hand, mostly because Sam wouldn't stop pestering me to just paint one thing. I was halfway through an attempt at a tree when Maya leaned over, peering at my work. "Not bad," she said, her voice carrying that warm teasing edge. "You sure you haven't been hiding in a studio somewhere?" "Pretty sure," I said. "But I'll take the compliment." After class, she didn't rush off. The boys were helping her carry supplies to her car, and I found myself just watching. She had this way of letting them help without making them feel like they were in the way, letting Eli carry the lighter boxes, handing Sam the keys to guard. Small things, but they added up. That weekend, she texted, "There's a food truck festival downtown on Sunday. You should bring the boys." I almost said no. Crowd still made me anxious, too many faces, too much potential for running into people I wasn't ready to see. But the boys overheard me reading the message and practically shouted over each other to say yes. Sunday afternoon, we found ourselves weaving through rows of food trucks, each one with its own smell, its own little crowd. The boys darted between stalls, arguing over whether tacos were better than dumplings. Maya was waiting by a lemonade stand, 2 cups in hand. She handed one to me before I could even greet her. "For bravery," she said, grinning. We ate on the curb, tacos, dumplings, and something called churro ice cream sandwiches, that the boys declared the best dessert in the history of desserts. At one point, Eli asked if Maya could come watch his next soccer practice, for research, which made her laugh until she nearly dropped her drink. By the time we headed back to the car, it was getting dark. The boys were tired but still buzzing from sugar and excitement. Maya walked with us to the parking lot, her scarf pulled tight against the wind. "Thanks for coming out," she said softly, her eyes on me in a way that made it hard to look away. "It's good seeing you laugh." I wanted to tell her that it wasn't just laughing, it was breathing differently. Lighter. Like maybe the life I thought had been completely dismantled was slowly, piece by piece, being rebuilt. Instead, I just said, "Yeah. It is." And as we drove home, the boys asleep in the back, I realized something that felt both terrifying and undeniable. I didn't just want Maya in our Sundays or our Wednesdays. I wanted her in all the spaces in between. The change didn't happen in one moment. It crept in like a slow tide, a text from Maya here, a dinner she stayed for there, a Wednesday class that turned into coffee afterward. Weeks blurred into months, and before I knew it, she'd become a fixture not just in our schedule, but in our lives. It was late April when the boys' school held its spring fair. One of those chaotic, cotton candy-scented afternoons where you lose track of time between raffle tickets and spilled lemonade. I hadn't planned on staying long, just long enough for the boys to win a few prizes and run themselves tired. But then Maya appeared at the ring toss booth, hair pulled back in a loose braid, laughing with the woman running it like they'd known each other for years. The boys spotted her and immediately abandoned me, dragging her toward the inflatable obstacle course. I stood there, watching her race them through it, her laughter carrying over the noise of the fair. That sound, it hit me harder than I expected. I realized I wasn't just glad she was there, I couldn't imagine this scene without her. That night, after the boys were asleep, I found her sketchpad on the kitchen counter. She must have left it behind by accident. I flipped it open, and stopped. The first page was Eli mid-kick from his soccer game. The next was Sam, head bent over a paintbrush, tongue poking out in concentration. There were more, moments I hadn't even realized she'd noticed. Me pouring juice at the market, the boys laughing in a laundry cart, the four of us sitting on a blanket at the field. Every page was a fragment of the last few months, captured in her steady, unflinching lines. The final drawing made my throat tighten. It was the three of us, me and the boys, at the kitchen table. Except in her drawing, she was there too, sitting between the boys, leaning in like she'd always belonged. She came by the next evening to pick it up, and I tried to play it cool, but I must have failed because she tilted her head and asked, "You looked through it, didn't you?" I nodded. "You see us," I said quietly. "Like, really see us?" Her eyes softened. "You've always been worth seeing, Daniel." Something in me shifted then, like the part of me that had been waiting for the other shoe to drop finally let go. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I wasn't patching holes in a sinking boat. Somehow, without me realizing, I'd started building something new. A week later, we were at the park, the boys kicking a ball around while we sat on a bench. I didn't plan the words, they just came. "I don't know where this is going," I said. "But I know I want you here. Not just for Sunday markets or Wednesdays. For all of it." She smiled, slow and certain. "Then I'm here." The boys called us over, demanding we join their game. We did, 4 players now, laughing under the late spring sun. And for the first time since that quiet click of the door months ago, I didn't feel like anything was missing. Life wasn't what it had been before, it was something entirely different. And maybe, just maybe, it was better.